Today on With the First Pick, we're going through our 2024 quarterback prospect rankings. And Rick, we got a real live quarterback, 2007 first round pick. It's Brady Quinn. Hey, Brady, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. I've been knocking on your door for a while now, trying to get on this podcast. Finally, they gave me an opportunity. I probably have a lot more questions for you guys than anything else at this point, but let's have some fun with it.
History Jenny guide, Rick loves when I ask him questions. He's always nice to the guests, though. So, Rick, are you on your best behavior?
Yeah. No, to have Charles last week for a mock and Brady this week, I mean, our podcast is really although Brady, I got to tell you, Charles came on a coat and tie. It embarrassed us all. I had on one of my Island shirts, and Ryan, whatever the hell he wears, whatever the shit he first thing he grabs out of his drawers in the morning. So,
well, Rick, as you can imagine, and I think my combine performance of only benching probably attested to this. I just tried to do a quick workout after I got done with radio this morning, so there's still a lot of meathead left in me.
All right.
Need a squeeze ball when you do these to get through it.
Two meatheads and me. All right, that's what we should call this podcast. All right, we're going to hit the big names, talk about their comps and how high or low they could, end up going on draft night, as well as which teams makes the most sense for each of these quarterbacks. We'll also talk about some day 2 and day 3 sleepers. Cough, Spencer Rattler, cough. That's my guy, Spencer Rattler. That was the joke there. And get Rick's top 10 quarterbacks from the last 5 draft classes. I'm, of course, Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman. That is Brady Quinn. And Brady, we have a little bit here we'd like to do before we get started. Rick, how many days to the 2024 NFL draft?
Okay, Brady, in case you did not know, this is the only key role I have in this podcast. There are 45 days left until the 2024 NFL draft. And the trivia question of the day, who was the most famous number 45 that you can recall off the top of your head? I have one.
I have 0 and 45. 45 is a rare number.
Of any sport? Because I was going to say Michael Jordan when he came back and wore the 4-5.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm going to go with Archie Griffin.
He wore 45?
College football, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that was a little bit ago. You remember that, Brady?
Obviously, I wasn't alive when he played, but I do recall growing up in Columbus, Ohio, him being on the number 1 spot in the Mount Rushmore of Ohio State players. I know that's got a little buzz this offseason. By the way, you know who's number 2 on my list? Orlando Pace. I don't think he gets his due. Wow. The fact that he finished, I think he was top 8, top 7 or 6, like as an offensive lineman in the Heisman.
Whoa.
I don't think people understand how dominant Orlando Pace was. I would put him at number 2 after Archie Griffin as far as greatest Ohio State players of all time.
Did my brother make the top 10? Is he like 7, 8? Just so I can tell him because he watches the podcast.
Who's that?
My brother.
Oh, yeah.
The better Spielman.
Yeah. Whatever number you said, he's in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris Spielman. Rick Spielman rides Chris Spielman's coattails once we get to Columbus. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Is that fair, Rick?
Yeah. No, I'm just a guy in the corner in Columbus.
By the way, Debo informs me, Brady, that Orlando Pace finished 4th in the Heisman.
That kid, 4th as a lineman?
That's ridiculous.
That's the
most ridiculous thing. That's all right. Anyway, that's again justifying right after Archie Griffin, the only 2-time winner is Orlando Pace.
There you go. All right. Nice fun fact there. There we go. Heisman voting. Danny Werfel, Troy Davis, Jake Plummer.
By the way, he got 87 first place votes as a tackle.
Ahead of Warwick Dunn.
Which anyone who watched Warwick Dunn, you're going, holy cow.
And junior year Peyton Manning. I don't remember what his I can see he threw for 3,200 yards, 20 touchdowns. He did have 12 picks that year.
Yeah.
But all right. Way to go, Orlando Pace. I think he'll probably be a pretty good player one of these days. So good luck to him. All right, let's talk about these quarterbacks. Speaking of good players, and Debo had us do our consensus rankings where we all sort of gave our top 5s, and then Debo put them together. And with the first pick calculator that we have here, Rick. First up, no surprise, Caleb Williams. And Brady, let me ask you this, because in the fall, you obviously do Big Noon Kickoff with Fox, and you guys travel all over the place. Was the feeling for you in the fall always Caleb Williams, or do you have any doubts? Because Rick and I have pretty much been on the Caleb Williams train since it feels like September.
Well, I think getting close to that program, being the fact that you work with some former Southern Cal guys, you kind of hear the behind the scenes. I don't think people on the outside truly appreciate just what he was overcoming during his time there. He had talent around him as far as guys to throw to, but the offensive line issues, the defensive issues, I mean, it was probably understated just how lackluster they were. And, he had to overcome that every single week. When you're Southern Cal and you're one of the top programs in the Pac-12, you're always going to have a bullseye on your back. And especially when you've got, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner too. And so for that reason, I kind of looked at this season, and I know he didn't play his best football in some of the biggest games, but you go back to 2 years ago, that film's pretty special. And even then, some of the film and some of the plays he made this year was pretty special. I mean, I tend to look at him and say, there are just things that you can't game plan for. You really, not many other people in the NFL now can do the stuff that he can do. The way he can throw off platform, the way he can throw cross body, cross field in different directions, how fast he can throw the football once he does decide to take off or move within the pocket or out of the pocket. He just has this uncanny ability of being able or knack of making plays. And I think the only criticism some people would have of him, outside of some of the speculation about, asking for equity or something within the team or all the other stuff that you hear that I don't buy into, is, does he play off script too much? Does he almost invite those off script plays? And so for me, I look at him and I say, since I, really saw him when he was at Southern Cal, that was when I was convinced. At Oklahoma, he was really good, but I wasn't convinced until I saw him at Southern Cal a couple of years ago, where I was like, oh, this is going to be the best quarterback, whether it was that draft class, even though he wasn't draft eligible yet, or now this year is his first one to be draft eligible.
Rick, you've been on the Caleb Williams train since September, right?
Yeah, no, since August, since July, since last April, since 2 years ago. I think he's a cut above everybody else, and everybody's going to poke holes this time of year. This is the whole poking season, and every NFL front office is like, there's no one to complain in the NFL right now until you get through all the rest of the process of the pro days, and you come back and you meet in April, and then all of a sudden you start loving everybody up again. But I think everything that Brady said is right on, except the two things that I think is sometimes, I agree, he almost invites waiting for extended plays where he holds the ball. And then that's where the processing comes into question. Just take the check down or the short crossing route, because he's always looking for the big play. The other thing is sometimes, he doesn't use his legs, because I think he's unique as an athlete. You probably could have seen him made more plays with his legs. And the third thing that I had a little bit issue with is the ball security in the pocket. He has a tendency to hang it loose. I think he had, I don't know how many fumbles he's had, but I charted 3 or 4 in the games I watched, and it's just carelessness with the ball that's easily cleaned up. But I think this guy, unique arm talent, unique athlete, unique big play ability. This guy to me is a cut above everybody else.
Hey, let me ask you this, Rick. What if you're sitting in a draft meeting and the OC and the coach want, let's say Drake Maye, for example, but you feel deep in your gut that Caleb's the guy? You always say it's a consensus. How do you sort through that?
We won't watch tape till it becomes a consensus. So, but now that I'm Brady, my role on this podcast, I'm just a scout in the corner. Brian's actually the star of the show, the GM. So I just make my comments and then laugh at him when he makes a decision.
Yeah. His role is to undermine me, is what he's trying to say, Brady.
Yeah, no, I can understand the dynamic between you two. I'm not really sure what my role is right now. The one thing I can say is, coming from the player standpoint, the tough part is, especially when you're the guy coming into the season and on the backside of the season, when you do start to hear criticisms, and I kind of laughed at it back then, and I still laugh at it now, is, it's always the tape. It's never going to be, in my opinion, anything other than the tape, unless you do something that's just ridiculous in a meeting with a team, or rub someone the wrong way in that sort of manner, or there's a medical evaluation that dings you. That's pretty significant. And so I always hear when we're talking about guys moving up, moving down, I'm like, all right, this is like agents trashing, players behind the scene to try to get their guy. Yeah. A lot of smoke screens by teams, guys like Rick, who are great poker players. I asked him, I don't know how long ago this was, when was his birthday? He goes, I don't know. I've got hit in the head too many times. And I think that that day it was his birthday, so I don't know if he forgot or if he just didn't want to tell me, but either way, that's the type of guy you're dealing with, and type of guys in the NFL you're dealing with, like Rick Spielman, who don't even want to divulge that information, which I could have just looked up on Wikipedia, but I thought he'd just tell me. So.
Right. Exactly. Brady, I'll ask you probably the easiest question you'll be asked today. Who's your comp for Caleb?
Well, the hard thing is, and look, I understand the rationale for a comp. I do. It helps people see into the future, helps see what this player could potentially be. I go through the exercise and activity of doing comps because I'm asked to. I personally hate it because I think when you take the time to get to know a lot of these guys, like I have, whether sitting down, interviewing them, watching them tape, you realize you want to recognize them for each individual that they are. And this is no disrespect to anyone, but like Caleb Williams is his own style of player with some of the things that he does that's very unique. So Mahomes is the one that I would say is closest to, and I think has the potential to be that. And I don't think that's overstating what he could be because he is the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. He did keep a team that I don't know that would be bowl eligible the past 2 years with as bad as their defense was. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think you go back to that question about Patrick Mahomes and why didn't they win more games? Well, did you see their defense? Like if you sat in a defensive coordinator meeting with David Gibbs, who is quite possibly one of my favorite people in all of college football to sit down and interview with, you'd understand they struggled. I mean, we talked to Baker Mayfield, Ryan, at the Super Bowl, and they're talking about a game where I think each team had 1,200 total yards. Like,
right. That's right. That was
absurd. It's absurd. Something like, or 1,600, I think was the total number, but each team had like 800 yards of offense. So I tend to look at it and say that's probably the closest comp. I hate doing this because everyone's like, oh, he's saying he's going to be the next Pat. No, I'm not saying that. But the things he can do with his arm, his body, it's closest to what we see with Patrick Mahomes.
Hey, Rick, hit the old Rolodex and assume that we lived in a universe with no Patrick Mahomes. Who would Caleb Williams' comp be then? Like, who's next? I didn't know who next would be.
I did for this show. I went off the cuff, just out of the blue, bizarro comps.
Okay.
And so, my comp for him, just on some of the throws to the right and thrown back across his body and some of the no-look throws and everything, Aaron Rodgers. I thought he did some shit. I'm sorry. I thought he made some throws and unique plays like Aaron Rodgers made back when he was in his prime.
He does good shit, Rick. I'll tell you. He does good shit.
You know what's funny? Debo's about to get promoted to like pretty high up on the org chart, and his last act with the first pick is going to be bleeping out all the S-bombs that you guys are dropping on.
I just want that shit back after that.
That's amazing. I still want Rick to be lonely,
Yeah, I get it. That was, excuse me, that clip there.
Brady's always been a team guy. It's me and him against Pete every Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's everybody against Pete. I've heard where Pete plays in scrambles and he's yelling at his teammate. That's how Pete rolls. So that makes sense. All right. Let's talk about a little Drake Maye here because that's when things get a little spicier. Brady, I'll come to you first. You and Rick both have Drake as your QB2. I have him as my QB3 behind Jayden Daniels. We'll get to Jayden in a second. So is this a situation, Brady, where you have to go back and watch 2 years of tape as well to be convinced that Drake Maye is who he's going to be?
I think so, at least in my opinion. It's really tight between the two. I just think they're two different players. Jayden has such an incredible dynamic ability to take off and run with the football that it's hard not to look at that and say, yeah, he probably should be in today's NFL when you see Lamar Jackson win the MVP this past season and not sit there and say he's probably the second best quarterback in this draft class. I've kind of lumped him and Drake Maye almost together. That's how tight it is. The film wasn't great this year from Drake Maye. I thought he was a little bit more inconsistent with his accuracy. There's reasons to be made for that. UNC's defense hasn't been good the past 2 seasons, really. He didn't have the same set of wide receivers we're talking about, like in Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, who will probably both go in the first round. And so that obviously plays a role as well. But he's still, I think, can play from the pocket. I think can play, process as far as seeing downfield. I think he's got plenty of arm, probably a little bit better than Jayden Daniels. But by the way, not by much. Again, we're talking about small differences between the two, but clearly Jayden's a better athlete, but I don't think Drake Maye's a bad athlete. So I've got these two really, really tight. I think the eye is in the, beauty of the beholder in this case. And I would put Drake Maye softly by ahead of Jayden Daniels in this case. And I think it honestly has a little bit to do with just Jayden Daniels and who he was throwing to. I think if you put Drake Maye in that system, he's probably putting up some really good numbers as well. That just wasn't the scenario for him in North Carolina.
Hey, Rick, one of the things that we've talked about Drake a lot. Actually, Brady, I think I talked to you about this on HQ a few weeks ago. I don't want to make the Justin Herbert mistake with Drake where his last season at Oregon wasn't great and you sort of had to read between the lines.
Justin got better and better and better, though. Like, I would say, if anything, when you look at this season for Drake, it's probably a little bit of a step back in some ways.
Okay.
So I'll say this. I don't think Drake Maye is as physically imposing or, as compared to Justin Herbert. When you walk down and see Justin Herbert in person, that is a large human being. And that ball, when it comes out, whistles. Neither Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye is in that category in that regard. So there's not as much of an Adonis effect, if you will, in that comparison between the two. By the way, my comp for him is a more athletic Carson Palmer. That's kind of what I saw in regards to what I think he potentially could be. Just kind of looking back on some of that.
Hey, Rick, what'd you think about Drake when you saw him on the set? Did he strike? He didn't strike you as the Justin Herbert physical type?
No, but he's big. He's bigger than I thought, more developed than I thought too. When we had him on set at the combine, horrible pickleball team. I'd love to play him against pickleball against the people I would just take anyone who had an 80-inch wingspan or longer and play pickleball with them, because you can't get the ball around those guys. But the things with Drake, the only thing that because I watched him play live against Miami 2 years ago, and I was really impressed just with his demeanor and the way he throws the ball. And I think he's an underrated athlete. I think he is a good athlete that can make plays. I think the biggest things that I saw was the do too much mentality this year, trying to overcompensate for the lack of receivers that he had. And Trez Walker didn't play till halfway through the year. He didn't have anyone else to throw to. The offensive line did not protect him very well. So I think he was trying to do too much. And the other thing that kind of stuck out to me that he's going to have to learn is that the pre and post snap reads, I think sometimes he gets a little hesitant in a pocket if the defense changes the look on the back end a little bit. And he just tried to force too many plays that weren't there and tried to, like I said, overcompensate for things instead of just playing within the scheme and system. But I think they just were under talented compared to what he had a year ago and the way he played a year ago. But I think this guy has huge upside.
Hey, Rick, I know you didn't ask Drake the same questions you would ask him in an interview. Any similarities, though, just in terms of demeanor with Justin Herbert, who I think you talked with pretty extensively a few years ago?
Now, again, I'm going outside the box thinking on my comps. And I
just mean in terms of their demeanor, like because they're not.
Yeah, no, I would love to have them sit there and why in the hell are you throwing it when three guys are on this guy?
I get that.
So there would be a lot of negative plays this year that we would have brought up that said, tell us your reads, tell us what you were thinking, and why would you do this? And just it'd be interesting to hear his responses.
What did Justin say when you asked him those questions a few years ago?
Well, Justin, we didn't. I think we had cousins, so I don't think we spent time with.
Okay.
Justin.
Did you talk to him at the Senior Bowl at all, or not at all? I thought maybe you said you. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Get to your comp then, because you're pretty excited about this out of the box. I can't wait to hear this one. This is a Ryan Wilson comp. I feel it coming on.
It is. I went into the Ryan Wilson mode on comps.
Oh boy.
With the length and a little bit the athleticism and some of the arm, I thought he had a little bit of Trevor Lawrence in him.
You've been saying Trevor Lawrence since September. I
know, but everybody keeps ripping me. Brady hasn't heard Trevor Lawrence.
No, the
I haven't. That's an interesting one. I think that could be fair in some ways. I think Trevor Lawrence has a stronger arm. And it's interesting, as far as the processing goes, I didn't see him in college when he was at Clemson have as much of an issue with the picture changing post snap. I thought really when their initial year when he won a national championship, he saw a lot of that in the national championship game, and I thought adjusted well. So that's it. That's an interesting comp, and I haven't seen Drake Maye in person. I have seen Justin Herbert.
I went based off the movement skills in the pocket and the little bit similar type athlete that can make some plays with his legs.
The one thing I would say in difference in, because I a lot of times pare it down to throwing motion, like how I kind of see the ball come out of their hand. And I would say, like for my comp with Carson, he's a more fluid passer, in my opinion, than when Carson was initially coming out.
Carson was a little bit robotic, wasn't he?
Yeah. That's why I said I think Drake Maye is maybe a fair comp in the sense of some arm strength, what he's capable of. But obviously Drake Maye is a better athlete, but size-wise as well. With what you're saying with Trevor Lawrence, I thought the one thing about Trevor Lawrence is he's kind of a longer-legged guy, longer strider. I don't see that with Drake Maye's throwing motion quite as much. I think he gets his front foot up and down pretty quick, which is important. One of the things for me was making an adjustment when I got in the NFL, and not to get off on a huge tangent, but like the way you were taught how to throw the football, more of that over the top motion, and especially for longer, taller, guys, you're going to stride a little further. At least that was what you were kind of coached to do or taught to do young, and those are your mechanics. When you got in the NFL, those pockets get tight. And so a lot of times you need to keep a little wider base because you're not going to step as much. You're really just going to turn. And that's where the evolution of the throwing motion is, where it's a lot more rotational and almost a little bit lower of an arm slot because of how you're going to spin to kind of throw. It actually plays better to a tighter pocket or a collapsing pocket so you can still get the football off, as opposed to stepping into a guy or not having enough room to step to throw. So that's the only difference I'd see between the two. Is I don't think Drake Maye is a big strider when it comes to that. I think he's got a little tighter action with that. And then again, this is just comparing Trevor Lawrence coming out to maybe where he is now too.
My quarterback coaching before I got moved to linebacker, because was everybody, it was like always throw from the ear. You drop back and you put it at your ear. Old Penn State backledge.
They used to always teach it too, to hold the ball up, right? Like I remember looking back in high school film, I was like holding it back here. Like, what am I doing? Like that you could back down on the chest plate and the way you carry it. And then I get it. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we got to fake like you're passing. Oh, yeah. Because that looks natural, right?
You have to make that noise too. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, anything that can spell it. Like I remember when we'd have like a reverse or whatever else. You'd be handing off, flipping the way, we'd be like, oh, boot, naked, like anything you could to try to sell the defense, just so they could hear someone yelling something.
By the way, Rick,
draw.
Yeah.
And then
I'd be dropping back on a draw, yelling, pass.
You guys are giving away the secrets. By the way, Rick, when I was talking to Brady and Leger for the Pick Six podcast, I don't know, a couple months ago, I asked Brady the hardest time he ever got hit. And speaking of like short pocket, like tight pockets, it was Pat Williams coming right off of Kevin Williams. Sorry, coming right off of Starcaps.
Yeah, it was back in 2009. It was like Brett Favre stole the show. So two things: Adrian Peterson had a huge game against us, but it was Brett Favre's first game in Minnesota, and he started off in Cleveland on the road. But what flew under the radar was I think Pat and Kevin Williams both were suspended, and they appealed a Starcaps suspension. And they were able to play that first game. I remember thinking to myself, this is not going to be fun. You got Jared Allen on the edge. That was already an issue to deal with. And then you got those two guys in the interior. It was a mess. It was tough.
Your fault, Rick.
Adrian maybe had one of the angriest runs I've ever seen along the sideline, where I can't remember who he threw someone out.
It was Brandon McDonald, our cornerback.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember seeing that being like, oh, God, this is not going to be good.
I'll never forget that game. I remember that.
Well, good. It came at Brady's expense, but okay, Rick, enjoy it. Enjoy the memories. All right. How high could Drake Maye get drafted? Any chance he goes number 1, Brady?
I don't know about number 1. I think he goes number 2 at the highest. I guess there could be a scenario where I don't know. Maybe it's hard to tell just because of the way the picks would work out. I think Washington would be fine with him at number 2. So I can't see him going any lower than 2. I think Caleb Williams is the consensus number 1. If Chicago was going to trade out of the pick, like that would be a team would trade up to that pick for him. I think he's that good. So
okay,
I don't see him going any higher than 2.
Hey, Rick, how low?
3. I don't think
no lower than 3.
Yeah, I don't think he gets past New England. Especially they just traded Mac Jones for a 6th, down to Jacksonville. They have to get a quarterback out of these top 3. And then I think this guy, and Brady, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I have more respect for you than Pete trying to correct me on my theories. But I think with Alex Van Pelt at the offensive coordinator position in New England now, that Drake Maye would be an ideal fit if he fell to, and that's why I don't think he would fall past 3.
Yeah, it's funny when you bring up like the fits and we were doing this activity, I was kind of racking my brain of the different rationale. Like I like that, but honestly, like I look at all these guys, I'm like, well, it's not so much how they fit with the coaching staff now. Like that was when I was drafted, that was what it was. Like you got indoctrinated into a system. You had to learn how to drop back again. You had to work on whatever it was to fit the rhythm and timing of the offense. to me, like Alex Van Pelt, if he goes to New England, is going to be working with like, hey, Drake, what concepts do you perform best at? How do you see the field? What plays, do you excel or do you feel most confident and comfortable with? So it's so much more, I think, now today, in my opinion, building around the talent you have as opposed to trying to find those players that fit the system you're working with. I could see that making a lot of sense, though, for him being in New England. I put Atlanta down for this reason and this reason alone. You've got different variations of guys to throw to, which he didn't have at North Carolina, right? You've, got your Kyle Pitts, you've got your Drake London, you've got, Bijan Robinson in the backfield. You've got weapons and who knows what else they do in the draft or free agency. So I was kind of looking at it from a standpoint of what team needs a quarterback, what team has weapons for him to throw to. Washington falls in that category too, to some degree, but I kind of looked at Atlanta. I was like, well, clearly it's a need, and clearly this is what he was lacking. And so that could kind of make a good system fit, scheme fit. Zach Robinson is going to run a similar system to McVay and Kevin O'Connell, so I think he'd fit well in that as well.
Rick, I'm going to ask you a weird question. Try to be patient with me. Let's say Drake Maye is your QB 2, and then JJ McCarthy is your QB 3, for example. It doesn't matter. Would you trade up to try to get that? And let's say there's a half a round difference, however you grade that between the two. Would you trade up from, if you're the Vikings at 11, for example, would you trade up to 3 or 4 for Drake Maye if he's your QB 2?
Heartbeat. If he goes past New England, someone's going to trade up to go get him.
Okay. Now, let's say he goes off the board.
If Atlanta thinks, and that's assuming, depending on what happens, if Kirk Cousins ends up there or not here in a couple of days, that this whole dynamic can change.
Yeah.
But if he's at 4, he's not going to continue to drop. Someone's going to get aggressive to try to come up and get him.
So you're not even hesitating.
Especially with Arizona at 4, they would be in a heartbeat trade out of that 4th overall pick to get more picks as they rebuild that program.
Okay.
So
I think the Giants are the other team to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Like, sitting there at 6, like they could be a big mover. Atlanta obviously could be as well. We know their desire to get a quarterback, but we'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins in free agency first, I guess.
All right, Debo reminds me, Rick, hold on to your hat here. That game that Brady got hit the hardest he's ever hit in his life, Adrian Peterson, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah, Brett was still getting used to everybody. That was his first game as a Viking, as Brady said. So we just gave the ball to the horse and let him see what he can do.
All right. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back here, we'll rip through the rest of these guys right after this.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, we'll pick up the pace here. Brady's got things to do. Rick, I'm assuming you have some pickleball to whip up on some old people, so I'll let you get to that.
He's got golf. He's got to get that golf game going.
Golf or pickleball today?
It's member guest season. Yeah, he's got to be ready, man.
I got a big match next weekend.
All right, get your mind right.
Get on the range.
Get your mind right. All right, Jayden Daniels next up. He's my QB2. You guys had him at QB3, and Brady said it was really close between him and Drake. So Pete says this. I don't disagree. I don't think any player in college football did more to help themselves last year than Jayden Daniels. Brady is the concern, just the fact that he, number 1 year wonder. Number 2, he probably weighs 210 pounds at 6'4".
No, because I think he'll put it on.
Okay.
I know he's a little older than most of these guys when they're coming into the league. So you'd think by this point in time he would have put more on. But I also, look, he's a dynamic runner. He's probably the closest thing as far as speed-wise and his ability to create big plays with his legs, maybe since Lamar Jackson. Kyler Murray is just such a different type of runner. I don't know if I'd throw him in there. But I guess I'll just get right to my comp. I had – it's a combination of guys. So I have Marcus Mariota as far as the production, looking at what he was able to do. Obviously, a fellow Heisman Trophy winner, true dual threat. But also I kind of had a mix of Dennis Dixon as far as the frame. If you'll remember him out of Oregon.
Yeah,
he would have been up for a Heisman had he not gotten injured and didn't quite work out as well, I think, when he got to this portion of heading into the NFL. But that's kind of how I see him. But I don't really have any reservations about him. I honestly feel like, again, this is a solid quarterback class, one in which he continues to get better and better and better, almost like a Jalen Hurts in that sense, where the more he plays, the better he gets. And I think that's what we've seen so far. So I don't know if we got any concerns. I think the only thing you look at is just say, all right, like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., easy to throw to at that level and have a ton of production. Like if he goes to a team that doesn't have that, right? Let's say New England at 3, will he be able to put up the same production? I think that's probably your only concern.
Who's your out of the box comp, Rick?
Yeah, no, I couldn't come out with an out of box comp on this one because I've been going with Lamar since the Florida game when he made it look like a Madden football game where someone was playing against the college defense and he was running all over the place.
So, Brady, we talked to Jayden, we talked to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. at the Combine. Who do you think's the fastest?
I mean, looking at it, between who again? Jayden Daniels and
his 2 receivers, Malik and Brian.
I don't know. Brian Thomas has to be the fastest, right?
Jayden told us he was the fastest, and then Malik told us he was the fastest, and then Brian told us he was the fastest.
At least Brian competed at the Combine. The other
at least Brian competed at the Combine.
Right.
All right, so I'm guessing Brady number 2 is as high as Jayden can get drafted. You're not going number 1, are you?
No, 2, and then I think that he can't go any lower than 8. I would be shocked.
8?
Again, it's all dependent on what Atlanta does, but I don't see him getting outside the top 10. I think he's going to end up getting drafted somewhere between 2 and 8.
You agree with that, or do you think is 8 too low, Rick?
Yeah, no, I said 6. I didn't
Okay.
think he could pass the Giants if it was at the Giants.
I feel like the Patriots are probably the worst landing spot just because the Patriots are in such disarray. I love Washington and I love Atlanta.
Atlanta would be a ton of fun to see, especially if you include a little bit of him in that running element with Bijan Robinson, the different things you can do with their personnel. That'd be a ton of fun to watch.
What do you think, Rick?
I'm not going to argue.
Oh, all right. Mark it down, Debo. He's not arguing. Must be talking to the owner trying to get me fired. All right. This guy, Brady, Pete makes fun of me for falling in love with all these players. I don't think I fell harder for anyone than Rick's favorite player on planet Earth, J.J. McCarthy. We had a chance to interview him. I don't know if you've spoken with him before. You probably have.
Yeah.
He's incredibly charismatic, and you get the sense that he can lead from the back even. I mean, he wasn't asked to do a whole ton. We've talked about that to death. My concern is that if we're being honest with ourselves, I feel like he's probably a late day 1 guy based on what we've seen, just because there hasn't been a lot. But he's going to get drafted top 10.
Yeah. I mean, I look, I don't necessarily feel that way about him because
neither does Rick.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the time of year where, you are taking into account what he's done. And I think, again, he didn't play in an offense that necessarily highlighted him to his full capabilities. And honestly, I don't know that was their strength either. Like if you're Jim Harbaugh, who's a great football coach, who obviously is now with the Chargers, they had some talent at wide receiver, but it's not like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., right? We're not talking about like 2 first-round picks that you're throwing to. So you're going to play to your offensive line, which has been one of the best in college football over the past few years. You're going to run the football, and you're going to ask your quarterback when it's time to make plays. And I thought J.J. McCarthy did that throughout the course of his career. So I think when you look at, to me, his accuracy, I think he's a much better athlete too than people give him credit. You talked about the intangibles, the football IQ, the charisma, the leadership, all those things. Like those are all things that we kind of saw and I was able to see over the course of his career at Michigan. The thing that I think is you kind of become a little bit worried with is just the way he can layer a ball. It feels like times he's ripping balls into tight windows as opposed to kind of throwing that 2 ball people talk about. It feels like it's a lot of fastballs. That's really the only thing that you look at. You don't see a ton of balls with a high trajectory downfield and kind of dropping in the bucket. Like that's the one thing that's kind of missing that you would like to see more. But I don't think he lacks anything, as far as within his game. So I look at him as a guy that my comp was Derek Carr, in part because they're similar in size.
Interesting.
I feel like the ball pops out of his hands, similar to Derek who was coming out. I think they're both better athletes than people give them credit. But I could see him going as high as 3 and as low as 16, depending on how this free agency and how the draft works out.
It's funny, Rick, he actually talked to us about layering those balls. I think you asked him specifically about that, and that's something he was working on. Did he tell us that on the set?
Yeah, and he competed and he layered balls at the Combine. So he got check for me.
Well, it's easier to layer balls when there's no defense out there. I mean,
don't worry about that part, Brady. Don't worry about that part.
I don't worry about that.
It's like being out in the driving range, Rick. When there's no water out in the driving range, it makes that 150-yard shot a lot easier.
Hey, Rick, is he a top 10 guy? Is he going top 10?
I think he can go. I think Atlanta may take a serious look at him as well. Again, depending on free agency. This is pre-free agency. I think Vegas at 13 could take a look at him as well. So, all right, you ready for my out of the box comp? This is out of the box day.
Go for it.
And I agree with some of the accuracy, but when I watched him finally throw live at the combine, he is a more athletic Kirk Cousins. That was my out of the box after I watched him live at the combine.
I mean, look, I like that in the sense that, when Kirk has to make a throw, he's kind of delivered, and that was what JJ was asked to do, especially this past year. So I could see some of that. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at those two. That is outside the box for me as far as, look at
outside the box comp day.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. I don't hate it. He's a hard comp too. All right, let me throw this at you. If he's going to be a top 10 pick, Debo, throw up I went back and looked since 2010. Here are all the quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 in terms of what you're getting. And I mean, Ryan Tannehill was sort of a project, but I think he's worked out. And when you start, Ryan Tannehill the last few years hasn't been great, but is his career going to be better than Ryan Tannehill's? I'm not sure. There's Marcus Mariota on that list, obviously. There are a lot of guys on this list that are really good players. Mr. Trubisky might be the exception. No disrespect to Mr. Trubisky, but the point is that when you draft in the top 10, you typically get a pretty high caliber player, and we're comfortable putting JJ in this conversation.
Yes, I am.
Okay. I just want to double check because I wanted to see what top 10 looked like over the last 14 years.
I'll be honest with you. I think when you look at like Daniel Jones and like in athleticism, charisma, IQ, and all that. Now, the funny thing is the best system fit when we went through our rundown and put him in was the New York Giants. And I could see the New York Giants becoming enamored with him just from Brian Daboll's play calling standpoint, the control that JJ could have within that system. I think he's probably as prepared as anyone coming into this draft class because he was working with Harbaugh. And then there's some things he could do with his athleticism, that skill set. So it's kind of funny. Like when I looked at that list of quarterbacks, I go, well, I could see a lot of similarities to maybe Daniel Jones and some of the thoughts on him coming out of the draft and how they would at least be comps to one another.
Yeah. I mean, no one's actually mentioned this because it's crazy town, but he's not as athletic, doesn't have as big an arm, is not as big as, but he might be better for Brian Daboll's system coming in than Josh Allen was from day one, just because he's more advanced in his football journey. Does that sound? Yeah. All right. By the way, Rick, my comp to outdo your comp, Ryan Tannehill coming out of Texas A&M. Thank you. At least Brady didn't just automatically dump all over it. All right. Let's get interesting here. We know these guys are going to be the top 4 guys off the board unless something crazy happens. Michael Penix Jr. is next up. And Brady, I'll ask the question that I ask every time. We talk. You just said tape. Why are we not taking Michael Penix Jr.'s tape seriously?
No, I think we are. I am. That's one of the reasons why I've got him where he is. And I would put a first-round grade on him. Because if you grade the tape, the past 2 years, it's hard. You're hard-pressed not to sit there and go, he should be a first-round pick. But, obviously everyone knows about his path medically, the injuries he sustained. That's an issue. You look at some of the guys he's thrown to too. And if, we talked about the concerns of, okay, well, where's all the production come from? Is the receivers, the quarterback, chicken and egg here? You get a little bit of that too, I think, with Washington's system. They throw the football a lot. That's part of it. I feel like when we watched what CJ Stroud did this past year and, until the Georgia game, I think people were like, man, how athletic is he? Can he move around? And then you saw in the Georgia game, we're like, all right, well, why didn't he do it more? Or whatever the questions were. I've heard that a little bit about Michael Penix. And it's like, well, look, I've been watching this young man since he was at Indiana. Like, I've seen him make some athletic plays. I think he's a little better athlete than people realize, but I think he's had to change his game because of how many knee injuries he's had. So that's really the concern, I think, is more just the medical. But, man, his tape, the way the ball comes out of his hand, he's talking about layering throws, talking about moving within the pocket to throw down the field and make plays. That's all out there. So I've got him as a guy that I think his highest could go as 3.
Ooh, what?
But I think, based on the tape, yes. But I also think there's a chance that he drops to the second round because people are concerned about the medical. And so, this is a little difference as far as where the ceiling and floor is, because to me, at least, there's unknowns. So I'm curious to see what Rick has to say about this.
So we all had him. Let me say quickly, Rick, we all had him number 5 on our list. Go ahead.
Yep. I had him as high as 13 to the Raiders.
Oh.
And then I had him potentially going in the second round, but this may be a player, depending on how teams graded him medically. Didn't hear anything negative coming out of the medicals. He participated at the combine, which gets a check in my box. And I wouldn't be surprised if a team that didn't get their quarterback that is in the second round moves up to the bottom of the first to get the fifth-year option, like we did with Teddy Bridgewater, like Baltimore did with Lamar Jackson. I could see someone doing that with him and moving back into the bottom of the first if he goes past the Raiders, which I think he will, to get that fifth-year option on him just because of the talent to throw. The only thing that he needs to work on, again, he's not the athlete of some of these other guys, but he may be the best deep ball thrower. It's when the pocket isn't clean, and you saw that in the national championship game a couple of times. I mean, it was like Katie barred the door that they came through, and just, when it gets noisy in the pocket and he does it. Now, to me, he's got that sense or knack to move around inside the pocket to create a little time. But if it gets noisy around his feet and stuff, does that bother his accuracy, or is he as good, especially with the way he got hit in that national championship game? That's the only thing because that was the last impression that you saw of him in college. You can't take that as your deciding factor, but it brings up the question on some of the getting the ball out and when there is pressure coming at you, and whatever reason, Michigan had an unbelievable defensive game plan against him. Can he handle that at the next level? Because the pockets aren't going to be as clean as they are, when he was at Washington.
And he did have a great offensive line. I do want to ask you that, Rick, is my kind of comp for him, just because it's hard with a left-handed quarterback coming up with a comp, given his track record history, everything else. And he's kind of got a unique throwing motion. I kind of said he reminds me of Stroud, just in the sense of the downfield accuracy, height, size. They're similar in that nature. But I guess a contrast or difference there, where Stroud left on quite possibly his best game ever of his career, right, whereas Penix maybe over the past couple of seasons left on one of his lowest games.
Yeah, and that's what you got to be careful of when you're judging this kid. Look at the overall picture. Don't look at the last game, So I have to say I was reading through a bunch of clips, watching tape, and watched him throw. And one of the interesting comps I saw out there, and I'm not going to take credit for it, but kind of made sense to me, was a little bit of Brissett.
All right. You can take credit for it.
It's hard for my mind to switch them around, and it's like the righty lefty thing. I was looking through all-time left-handed quarterbacks. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't find one.
Now, it's easy to say Tua, but I think he has a stronger arm than Tua down the field.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He didn't like the Tua comp either, because he said essentially that it was lazy because they're both left-handed. I get that. So I walked back my Tua comp after he said that. Right to my face. By the way, Rick, where would you have been on Michael Penix Jr. if he, after the Texas game, just decided, which was a high note, that was his Georgia game, so to speak, for CJ Stroud, if he just decided not to play in the the finals, but he ended on the high note.
Yeah, if he decided not to play in the national championship game.
But ended on a high note, though. He had a great
game. He had a great. I would still say there was a couple of times where it got noisy in the pocket. That if the pressure is around his feet, that's where the accuracy issues start to show up a little bit. Now he can move and make his feet clean in the pocket, but like I said, it was magnified or amplified, whatever you want, whatever term, in that national championship game.
A couple things I'll note before we take a break here. Number one, he would have been better protected if his offensive linemen weren't wearing shorts, which is one of Rick's big things.
I hate that.
Number two, we talk about Caleb Williams feeling frenetic at times. When you sort of watch his feet are like CJ Stroud. He's incredibly calm in the pocket. It felt like Drake was a little more nervous. Michael Penix Jr. when he was pressured, just something that I noticed in passing. And all right, let's take a break here. But Debo wants me to mention we're skipping over Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. Super disrespectful to both those guys, mostly Spencer Rattler. But then we're going to get to our tiers and historical rankings.
I wish I could give you my comp for him, by the way, too, because you're gonna be like, "What the hell?"
Let's do it real quick. Which guy, Bo or Spencer?
Spencer.
Yeah, what's your Spencer comp?
size and then kind of similar, somewhat productivity. I don't know if that the South Carolina offense helped Spencer Rattler, but Chase Daniel. As far as just spinning the football out, spinning it.
I like it.
That was kind of my comp for him, but both, I think 6 foot.
Yeah, that's
200
right.
pounds or so, kind of slinging around. So I kind of felt like a little bit more of that. But Spencer Rattler was a tough one for me because he throws the ball so fluidly, kind of has that whip to it. But Chase had a little bit of that too.
Do you have a Spencer comp that you want to make amends to our buddy Spencer real quick, Rick?
Yeah.
Be nice.
Jaron Hall.
That's
BYU.
That's the opposite of nice.
I feel like he's a better athlete, though, is he not?
He's a little better athlete, but I'll give you this stat that I was reading through stats. I was looking at stats and all that stuff. You know, statistically, height, weight, all that stuff.
Yeah.
He is very similar to Brock Purdy.
Ooh, Brock has Spencer has a much better arm than Brock, but everything else, right?
Yeah, all the other stuff that you look at, all these analytics people break. It's analytics. It creates conversation. That's all.
Brady.
No, I'm quickly going to say this. So high low. I thought, look, if someone loves him, they feel like there's a need there. They don't get a quarterback free agency. Maybe he gets to 16. In the first round. I know, but I'm saying that's maybe as high as he could go.
Oh, you think so?
Maybe, but low. I had him at 63 in the second round. What team would that be? San Francisco 49ers.
San Francisco 49ers.
And here's the thing, too, is they need a backup. Both their backups are free agents. So that could maybe make some sense there. But
I've talked to teams that like him on day 3. Rick likes him on day 3 as well. I like him on day 2.
Yeah.
That's good. Good for you. He'll be the next Brock Purdy, and you'll be laughing at both me and Brady all the way through.
Brady likes him. Don't put Brady. Don't lump him in with you.
Okay, then you can laugh at me. That's why then you can keep me, and then I probably won't get an extension as scout in the corner.
Oh, stop it. I'll tell you this story that I tell every podcast, Brady, just because I don't think you've heard it. Then we'll take a break and rip through these tiers. At the Combine a couple weeks ago, I was just standing off to the side of the set, and Spencer Rattler came up and said, hey, I don't know Spencer. He came up to me and said, hey, thanks for having my back, because he watches the podcast because I've been supporting him since September. And he pointed at Rick and goes, that guy? Not so much.
Well, I'll say this about him. He's got maybe some of the most talent throwing the football of anyone in this draft class. So, I'm not sure, again, South Carolina was conducive for, him putting up stats. But, yeah.
He got sacked 9 times in the opener against UNC. I mean, come on, give me a break.
And by the way, I was there at the bowl game when they played Notre Dame. They had all those kids who opted out. I mean, it was a back and forth game. It was a ton of fun to watch. I mean, he played well, man. He put the ball in some tight windows. It was a ton of fun to watch.
Any rebuttal, Rick? Or are you good?
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll rip through these quarterback tiers right after this.
And the crowd goes crazy.
All right. Hey, Diva, let me ask you that photo ready that I sent you. And I'll bring that up in a second. In the meantime, Brady's breakdown. His tiers. Tier 1, Caleb by himself. No surprise there. Tier 2, you have Drake, Jayden, JJ, and Michael Penix Jr. in Tier 2, and then Bo and Spencer in Tier 3. So, let's talk about Tier 2, Brady. You have Drake, Jayden, JJ, and Penix all grouped together. What does that mean for you? I think you sort of hinted that Drake's sort of off the board first, but those guys could all go in round 1 is what I'm getting.
Yeah, and honestly, I'd throw Bo Nix in that group, looking at it again with how I did it.
Okay.
I just feel like there's going to be mixed opinions. I would imagine, and maybe I'm wrong with how you guys have viewed it or how we did this, but Rick, I would imagine the people you talk to in the league, everyone's going to say Caleb's 1. Then after that, there's going to be varying opinions on who's 2, who's 3, who's 4, and how they see the different attributes of these quarterbacks. Teams that can utilize Jayden Daniels' skill set and what he showcased at LSU his final year might be saying, like, that guy, to me, I can make him into an MVP, or Drake Maye, what we've seen. Like, they're willing to look past some of the things that he didn't have in North Carolina and maybe some of the inconsistencies that you saw this past season as opposed to 2 years ago, or J.J. McCarthy and the fact that he didn't do as much, but we feel like if we put more on his plate, he can do more. So I think with every one of those players, Penix downfield, his accuracy, all that we talked about, Bo Nix and his accuracy. Like, I don't care what offense you run. I know he threw a bunch of balls behind the line of scrimmage and some shorter passes too, to put up the NCAA completion percentage record, like it's still I mean, it's not like he's throwing the ball 10 times a game. He's still out there executing the offense at a high level, even given his age and experience at the college level. So I think I'd throw all those guys in that next tier. And then I've got Rattler kind of after that, where I don't know that he was quite as productive. You got kind of more, maybe questions or concerns about, really what he'll end up being at the next level as compared to those other 5 guys. Mix and match them however you want.
So let me ask you this, Brady. How many first-round quarterbacks do you think there are?
Well, I'd say Caleb Williams, without a doubt, is a first-round grade. I think you'd throw Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels into that as well. As far as McCarthy, Penix, and Nix, that's like the next that may not have a first-round grade, but could be taken in the first round. So I know that's maybe talking out of both sides of my mouth. Then maybe that sounds like high, but I think there'll be 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round.
Okay, so over and under, I've been setting it usually like 4.5, just in.
I would take the over in that case.
Check the over 4.5, Rick.
Under.
Oh, you don't think Penix makes it?
No, I think. Oh, Penix, I do. I would say 5 because I think someone will trade up to go get Penix.
Okay, all right. So
it's a byproduct of free agency, right? I mean, someone's gonna get Cousins, whether it's Minnesota, Atlanta, whoever, and then you still have Las Vegas, you still have Denver, you still have all these teams. You still have Atlanta if he goes back to Minnesota, right? Like, who need a quarterback? The Giants, are they going to play through the season with a healthy Daniel Jones? And then that's not in counting the first 3 we see off the board. So I would say the over at 5, maybe even 6. Maybe see Bo Nix and Penix both go.
All right, Rick, your tier, you have Caleb at 1 alone, as do I. I mean, we all agree on that. And then you have Drake and Jayden in tier 2, and then tier 3 is JJ and Michael Penix. But all those guys are first-round picks, according to you. The tier 2 guys probably go top 10, and then the tier 3 guys are probably 11 to 32.
Yeah.
Okay. Bo Nix, no chance for you?
No.
I haven't talked to any teams like Bo Nix, but I know that Daniel Jeremiah has had him in his top 40 the last two times he's released his top 50 players. So that's curious to me. I like Bo Nix. It just feels like he's been playing in the league forever and sort of just there. I don't know. It's weird to me. All right.
What he's missing probably is the big moment. That, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you watch him, you see the production, you see the athleticism. If you talk to him, he's very mature. He knows football, right? He's got all those things. It's just, there's not that one moment. Like, if they had knocked off Washington, maybe that was, the turning factor, deciding factor. I think that's something that Michael Penix has over him, playing him twice this season, where Penix has just shined more in those games.
And just sometimes and I'll never forget the one throw, and I'm not basing this off one throw, but sometimes he tries to almost aim the ball instead of just throw it when there's some easy touchdowns there, especially down in the red zone or near the goal line. A couple of times he just throw the ball. Sometimes he gets almost like pushy.
Too cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just throw the ball to the throw, make it play.
There was a term that I heard too when I got in the NFL. I can't remember who said this, but they feel like there's those moments where they're watching the quarterback and they feel like he panics. And I don't feel like he does that. Yeah. I feel like he more when it comes down to that, he resorts more to want to run or want to create instead of either moving, sliding, throwing, or something else. But again, he very well could go in the first round. It's funny, his accuracy was pretty ridiculous this past year, and you wonder if a place like Denver, wouldn't be a decent fit based on Sean Payton, Drew Brees, and how that worked.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. All right, let's talk about some of these sleepers here. Brady, your sleeper is one of the fastest people at the combine. Keaton Slovis ripped out a 4.5.
Who saw that coming?
No, Keaton Slovis didn't see that coming.
No. I'm still sure. I'm not sure we're checking the official time if that was accurate. It was a 35-yard dash. No, but in all seriousness, this is a mature, experienced quarterback's been a bunch of different systems. Kind of burst on the scene at Southern Cal his first year, and then got kind of lost by the wayside. I just think if you're looking at a guy who can come into the league, I think take on an NFL system. He's a smart guy. He's a good athlete, can move. And in today's NFL, you have to be able to do that. He's a guy to me that kind of stands out as far as having the potential to find the right situation and circumstance and then take it and run with it.
Hey, Rick, your guys, Jordan Travis, had that leg injury late in the season that got Danny Cannell all fired up. once Florida State was not allowed to play in the playoffs. If he stays healthy, that would have been a fun watch because they were undefeated. Went to the Shrine Bowl, was at the combine. I feel like he has a chance to be a mid-day 3 guy who you just sort of stash and then you roll with going forward.
Yeah, no, everybody forgets how many games he won, and it's not always pretty. I mean, the LSU game, there were 2 like mind-boggling decisions, and one should have been intercepted. Yeah. But I thought this kid had some it factor to him. And just so everybody's watching the YouTube, that my name is in the middle, but they got Carter Bradley. So whoever put this together, Debo,
how about you thank Debo for putting the graphic together instead of crapping all over him?
I'm just saying, these things drive me crazy, the little minute things. So Travis should be, and then if you're talking last, Carter should be.
Oh, Jesus.
But I just thought, some of the layers that he talked about, layering the ball to Keenan or Coleman in red zone and where he places the ball for Coleman to go up and get the ball. I thought he did some really fun. He was fun to watch on tape. He's not the strongest of arms. He's not the most athletic, but he has a knack for feel for the position. I don't think he'll ever be a starter, but reminded me a little of when we had Case Keenum in Minnesota.
Oh.
It kind of reminded me of a little bit.
Well, first, let me start off by saying that I'm very appreciative that Debo put this graphic together. Spelled my name right, so I'll take that. I went with Carter Bradley, Gus Bradley's son. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. Didn't get a combine invite. And Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the combine invites, they're not just willy-nilly. It takes over the course of the season, you're submitting players. Is that how it works? Each team does that?
Yeah, and they had a ton because this was a big draft class because of I call them the COVID babies and how many people came back. I mean, 300, I can't remember that big of number at the combine, whatever they had. I don't know if that was a record, but 331, I think, were invited to the combine this year. So, and he didn't get an invite, but his path is almost a little bit like Pat Shurmur's son, who played at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Kind of bounced around a little bit on some practice squads. Kyle.
Yeah, Carter went to the Senior Bowl. The moment wasn't too big for him. Last year, we talked about Tyson Bagent showing up and looking lost at times, and Tyson went on to have a pretty good rookie season, all things considered, as an undrafted free agent.
I was going to say this, too. I thought it was interesting. I'm curious to get Rick's opinion on this, yours as well, Ryan, because I looked at, like, Caleb, choosing not even to do medical, which was interesting, right? I know you've knocked out a lot of these guys, Rick, for not participating at the combine. But that took it like a step further in choosing to say, hey, there's only a handful of teams that are going to draft me. I actually thought that was a savvy move. Like I thought if I don't have to give out injury information to other teams that don't have any interest in drafting me, why would I? Like we just went through a very divisive time in our lives where people made a big deal about whether or you were vaccinated or not. And then now we get to a point where people held that pretty close information, were private about it. And now we get to a player who's like, well, why would I give my medical information if I get a bad knee or a bad shoulder to these guys so they can kind of know that and tee off on me or ding me in the future? It kind of made all the sense in the world to me. I just look back and I'm like, dang, I didn't know you could do that. But I'm sure you didn't like it knowing you, Rick.
No, I hate it with a passion, to be honest with you. So the purpose of the combine is so all 32 teams can get the information they need. And I'll just give you an example. Last year, how do you know that Atlanta doesn't move up to the number 1 overall pick? But Caleb Williams, what if Atlanta wants to bring him down for a physical?
Which he said he would do. They would bring him in for a private.
So he would rather fly around and do 15 physicals instead of getting it all done at once.
Well, that's his choice,
that's
right?
Asinine. That's just totally asinine. You're going to be on a plane 15 different times for the month of March. Then how good are you going to be at your pro day when you go out there and throw at your pro day?
Hey, Rick.
I'm assuming he's going to throw at his pro day.
He's flying PJ, baby.
Huh?
He's flying.
He's got that NIL money, Rick, and that's really what bothers these guys. There's players have now, and they've got more power than ever. This is the first group.
It's not the players; it's the damn representatives that are trying to take over the combine, and that's idiotic and it's moronic.
Hey, here's all I'll say in this regard, though. There is an element of I don't know. I think as a player, because here's the other thing: is I was in that draft class. I would never forget sitting on camera and have to answer a question of whether or not you smoked marijuana. Now, I've never to this day in my life smoked marijuana.
You can't ask that question anymore.
Well, you can't anymore, but my point is they did ask it back then. And guess what happened after everyone answered it? We had a Hall of Famer that was in my class that said he did. And what happened? It became public. So I personally stepped back from that and thought there were some other players that got leaked out too that did. And I was like, why would I give anything to these guys if I don't have to? Right. And that's more what bothers me about it is good for Caleb Williams. If that team is actually serious about bringing you in for a visit and doing medical, then good. Have them come spend the money to bring you in. If you want to do it 15 flights, visits, whatever, that's on you. But good for him from that standpoint.
Now, but let me ask you this. It tightened up a lot more. Has anyone heard anything about Latu's physical? Has anyone heard he funked a physical or not?
No, but we did hear about CJ's S2 score.
Yeah, well, that's stupid.
Sure, but like that's an example of last year, something that leaked out. And here's the thing is, it's early. We didn't hear about the whole S2 store until after the fact as it got closer. So that's the other part of it is like we haven't heard anything about Penix injury. We know about his
How do you know if that didn't get leaked out by another agent?
And that's the risk you take because you don't. But all I know is you know if you're giving it to all 32 teams, you have 32 chances of someone leaking it to that agent.
Yeah, but you're assuming that it's the agent leak or it's the team leaking it out.
Well, how else will the agent get that information?
The agents are very resourceful. I know.
they're breaking HIPAA laws. Is that what you're saying right now?
Yes, I am.
Oh no, he's not saying that. Stop. He's not saying that.
I'll just say that I remember one of the drafts. I think Adrian Peterson somehow needed a surgery and a plate on his clavicle. I don't know how that stuff came out.
Well, I can tell you this much from training with him, we all knew that. So I'm not saying it came from a player, but I was out with him in Arizona, and I just remember watching him practice his 40, and I was like, my God, like this dude would literally tear up earth when he would plant on his 5.10.5 and everything else. And I was like, this is the most explosive. Like his body, he was so explosive. His body couldn't handle how explosive he was.
Right.
Like that. I've never seen anyone like move the way he did out of a dead stop. It was anyway, not to get off.
That was Rick's your first draft, right, Rick, in Minnesota?
But again, so now Brady, you're confirming that it's the players that they're training with that leak out the information.
No, he just said the players aren't. He didn't say he.
I just said we knew because all I knew was watching was like, oh, I was like, well, clearly he's got a little imbalance there.
Okay, if you go to CBS, you're just starting and you just got done playing, and so your name and everything, and they ask you to do something on camera so we can see if you can go on. You're going to say no.
Yeah, maybe. Here's what I'm not going to say no to going on camera. I might say no to whatever they ask me. I don't have to give them my medical information.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
So I think the disconnect is that Rick is, despite how he treats me on this podcast sometimes, has the highest integrity, and he thinks everyone else should, and they don't. And then things get a little.
Is that an integrity thing though, or is it just a personal information thing? Like,
I mean, in terms of like giving the information to teams for them to use it properly, and then those teams or whomever releasing it, and then
and it's a shame on them if they're doing shit like that. There goes the S word again.
Well, I would look at it from a competitive advantage standpoint. Like if I'm Caleb Williams and I've got some injuries that I don't want my opponents to know about, like there's that element of it too. That I'm like, as a competitor, I'm like, I don't want anyone who I'm going up against to know anything about me. I want you to only know what's out there. And then, let's keep everything else behind closed doors.
How about this? Okay. We found 3 guys, and I've been there, that actually saved their lives because they took the medicals because of some kind of heart. We found one guy that actually had leukemia, didn't even know it, came out of the medicals with leukemia, got the proper, probably saved his life, and he's fine now. And it was like about 8 years ago. So there are some positives that can come out of this as well, as far as life-saving things that you potentially find with these guys.
Yeah, although I do kind of look at their former university and go, what happened there? Do you guys not have a proper physical every year? Like there's.
Well, what if you're at a small Division II or Division III school that doesn't have that?
Well, that sounds like more of a medical care issue.
And by the way, a D2 player is not going to refuse to do whatever you ask him to do. Like Adam Thielen probably did everything you asked him to do, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, it's a event that is.
So, the headline is Rick Spielman saying the combine saves lives, so you should participate. It saves lives.
That's great. Yeah, you can be this, folks. Brady, do you
Combine
have to go?
Let me see. I'm going to throw for a living, but I'm not going to throw at the combine.
Oh,
I don't
gosh.
care if you hit a bull in the ass with a base fiddle at the combine. I want to see you drop back. I want to see the ball come out of your hands because I haven't seen it, only on tape.
Some people call that lazy. Then Rick, you should have made a game during the course of the season. Just saying.
Brady, you're
I
going to
see a lot of people out there on the road for these big games we get to go to. I didn't see Rick Spielman. Sounds lazy to me, man.
Well, CBS has a tight budget, so I can't get out there anymore. But when I was a GM, I went to every one I possibly could, especially if we were in a quarterback. But I can't get to them all. I can't get to all the pro days. So
Brady is trying to kill Rick Spielman on the show. Brady, do you have to go, or do you have a few more minutes?
No, I've got to go. I mean, Noah's gonna be really upset if I don't get there by 12 on the dot. For
all right. Well, thank you.
We should do it again sometime. Can we do this again sometime?
Yeah, we can do it again. Absolutely.
We can tell stories like the time when Sony Michel told me at the combine, he still to this day does not know who his roommate was for the entirety of his combine visit. So he had a complete stranger sleeping next to him 4 feet away that he never figured out who it was.
All right, Debo, can we have Brady back on?
So now he's not going to be able to relate to his teammates when he's in the NFL. When you got a room, the rookies got to room up with each other during training camp.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm just saying, like, it feels like it's more like you sleep in a hostel if that's the case, right? Like it was like you have no idea who's sleeping next to you.
That is weird. Debo, can we have Brady back on at some point?
Open invite.
Open invite. All right, so we'll do the Rick Spielman top 10 QBs of the past 5 drafts. We'll have to do that later, since Brady derailed the podcast talking to Rick about medical concerns.
Why don't we keep going? We can let Brady go.
Oh, okay, we'll do it real quick. Thank you, Brady. It was good seeing you,
Thanks,
man.
Guys.
I'll see you Wednesday. Yeah.
All right, here we go. We'll do the top 10. All right, compose yourself, Rick. Brady tried to get you fired up and then just peeled out of here.
It's all the players. I've argued with every player on every show. It's players versus front office. It never changes. That's the evolution of life.
All right, here's Rick Spielman's top 10 quarterbacks of the past 5 drafts. Oh, we have a new number 1. Take us through these, because last year this got some run, and you're mixing things. Oh my gosh, this list is crazy town. All right, go ahead, take us through the list.
This is them coming out of college. That's the point of emphasis.
Has nothing to do with what they do in the NFL. This is their evaluation coming out of college.
This is their evaluation coming out of college. To me, Caleb's been the best quarterback I've seen in the past 5 draft classes that have come out of college.
Okay.
So, then Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and then I got Drake Maye right below Justin Herbert. And I understand he didn't have the year he was supposed to have, or didn't check all the boxes, and we talked about why. But I still think that he is right butt up next to Justin Herbert. Then Jayden Daniels, because of the vast improvement he's made in the strides from Arizona State to even last year at LSU to this year. Then Bryce, CJ, Tua, and my number 10, who I put ahead of Justin Fields, was JJ McCarthy.
Ahead of Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, and Jalen Hurts from back in previous draft classes. So if I'm reading this list correctly, if 10 teams needed quarterbacks and Rick Spielman was the GM of 10 teams, they would go in this order off the board, correct?
That's how they would be stacked on my draft board.
Yeah.
But they all came out together.
Debo, does Drake Maye feel sort of high at 5?
The fact that Drake and Jayden would be the number 1 pick in last year's draft over Bryce and CJ surprises me, based on how we talked about Bryce and eventually CJ last year.
Are you turning on Bryce Young? Is that what I'm hearing, Rick?
Bryce was 5 last year. He wasn't better than Justin, Joe Burrow, or Trevor Lawrence.
That's true.
Yeah, he's consistent. I sent Rick last year's list. But yeah, I probably would have thought
these directions were clearer than the mixed up in pictures and names. So thank you. Debo, do you want me to be your what's it called when someone proofreader?
It's proofreader. I love that you had to think of the word. They're going to say mentor. Mentor/proofreader. All right. I would imagine this is going to get some pushback. I don't hate it. I mean, Caleb at 1 makes the most sense. Trevor Lawrence he didn't have a lights out final season at Clemson. I thought he was better the year before. Joe Burrow absolutely did, but there were concerns about just his arm strength and the physicality and so on and so forth. Justin Herbert didn't have a lights out season this final year at Oregon. It's turned out to be a really good player, although that team struggles to win. Drake's a little high for me. But I get why you have him there. Bryce's height. CJ didn't ball out to the Georgia game. Tua had the injury, and then JJ. Once you get that low, I mean, you're talking about Justin Fields, who has yet to do anything. Anthony Richardson looked good, but only played a handful of games where he got hurt. And then Jalen Hurts has been a surprise, I think, as a second-round pick. All right, I'll give this I'm going to use pluses and minuses. I'll give this an A. I'll give it an A, just straight up A. I wasn't going to give you A minus. How you feel about that?
It's an honor that just the guy sitting in the corner of the room will get an A from the boss.
How ironic is it that it took Brady in 130-something episodes to get you as fired up as you did? I had nothing to do with it.
It wasn't fired up. It was just two differences of opinions.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Debo, how fired up was Rick?
It was like an 8 for Rick.
It felt like an 8.
I would say him trying to get us to order dinner or lunch was a 10.
That was a 10, 100%. At the combine, Rick had not eaten all day. It was 4:30 p.m. and he was ready to. He almost the poor waitress. I think she quit. The way
I treated her very well with a tip. If they are fast with service, they get rewarded way more than 20%.
that was definitely a 10, and I think this is an 8. He got you so sidetracked. I was going to bring up a picture of Brady at his draft night wearing his fit. I wanted to get him to grade it, but we'll talk about that later because it was quite the fit. 2007. You guys didn't even consider drafting Brady as Adrian Peterson all the way?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I think that was probably the best pick for you. I'm not going to push back on that. All right, Rick. That's it. You got to get to Florida. I got to get to Connecticut. Got to talk free agency. Episode 132 in the books. We'll be back later this week to talk running backs with Emory Hunt. Saw Emory's list. It's going to be a wild list, Rick. So we're going to have some things to talk about with Emory about the quarterbacks. Last year, he had Jahmyr Gibbs 1, Bijan Robinson 2, and Deuce Vaughn 3. And we had some fun talks about that. And I think this list will be no different. And then you and I will be back later in the week, going to 3 times a week. Debo's cracking the whip. What are we talking on Thursday, Debo? Free agency reactions?
Yeah, post-free agency mock.
Ooh.
Post-free agency mock. There we go.
That's
And then
gonna be
next week, Rick,
yeah,
we're going on network, baby. Podcast is going big time, potentially. So that'll be something else to look forward to. Hopefully I'm not spilling the beans, Debo. All right. Episode 132 in the books. Thanks to Brady. Thanks to my guy, Rick. Thanks to Debo for producing. Thanks to all you guys who watch and listen and comment. We'll be back later this week. See you then.